Very special thanks to Affordable Prestige Cars for providing the XJR in this review, and of course, if you are a follower of Beards and Cars, you'll have seen that I've worked with these guys plenty of times, so if you are in the southwest of the UK, or maybe even a little bit further afield, and you're interested in a Jag, either normal or high performance, or maybe something else as well, then of course you can click the link right below this video in the description and check out their current stock. The Jag XJ has always been one of those cars that I've had a soft spot for, and contrary to my age, I've always liked the old man's generation, the X350. In fact, it's my favourite XJ of all. That's the car that this one replaced. This, of course, being an X351. And I've actually talked about a lower spec model of this before on the channel a couple of years ago, which, if I recall correctly, I think was like a 3-litre diesel model, something like that. And it was a lovely car. I had one major gripe with it though, and that was the headroom. And we're actually going to come back to that in this video, curiously. In my opinion though, I have something of a hot take when it comes to this car, and it's something which some people won't like, and it's something which I believe some people might really like, because it might be something that you've never even thought of before. Certainly something that you won't have thought of if you haven't driven one of these. And you can be forgiven for not having test driven one because you don't exactly see too many of these around, and that ties into what I'm saying. See, when it comes to high-performance Jags, be it an XJR, XKR, even an XFR, at least here in the UK, and I believe in the States as well to some degree, and maybe parts of Europe, they're not exactly rare. You see plenty of them around. Curiously though, you don't see plenty of these around. In fact, even on Auto Trader, for example, there really aren't that many for sale. A handful, all things considered, and they're all shockingly well priced for what they are. Take this exact car. This is a 2014 shape, mileage isn't overly high for its age, less than 10,000 miles a year, and yet it's literally £23,000. That's insane in my opinion, because consider what this car offers. It's powered by a 5-litre V8, no surprise there from Jag, supercharged of course, to 542 horsepower, has over 500 pound-feet of torque. The 0 to 60 time is a savage 4.4 seconds, and the top speed, curiously, has a raised limiter to 175 miles an hour. Now, some of the things that I just said might sound a little bit strange for an XJR, and I believe, and this is my hot take, I think Jaguar made a major mistake with this car. It's a small thing. In fact, it's one letter, but I believe that one letter would have made this car worth about 10 grand more now than it is. And I believe that they also named a slightly lower model incorrectly also, much to their own detriment, because 542 horsepower, that should sound awfully familiar from a high-performance Jag. Two in particular that I've already reviewed. One of them is called the XFRS, and the other is called the XKRS. Both of those cars have this same engine. You'll notice this car has a distinct lack of the letter S on its boot lid. That, I believe, is Jaguar's mistake, because honestly, this is not an XJR. Everything about this car, from its performance to its marketing, even to the way it performs and especially how it handles, is pure RS Jaguar material. This feels like the hardcore Jag, and that is not what you want from an XJR. I believe Jaguar's mistake was by not calling this an XJRS, and then by extension, the actual XJR is not called that at all. It's called the completely forgettable XJ Supersport 5-litre, which, I mean, who's even going to pay attention to a name like that? Look on the used market and you'll see how many people pay attention. They're worth like 10 grand, except for that 10 grand, you get the same 5-litre engine, but with 503 horsepower instead of 542. That is an XJR, and just by looking at the car, you can tell it's one. It's more understated, it's more stately. That is what the XJR arguably has always been. It just takes what the XJ is already good at, luxury, smoothness, space, class, and then just gives it a bit more punch. It's essentially a sledgehammer with a leather handle. It's comfortable, it's refined, it's well made, but it's still a sledgehammer underneath. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's what makes them so fun. It's this civilized, tuxedo-wearing older gent on the outside, but it's pure British muscle underneath. And it's very, and this is part of the reason why I love them so much, torque forward. It's not a high-end horsepower car, it's a low-end torque. The X350 in particular, with that 4.2 litre engine, you roll on the power and it just surges you along with that deep V8 rumble. This doesn't do that. This feels like a super sports car engine because, again, XJRS is what should be written on the car. That ties in as well to the handling. The handling on this thing, I believe, could straight up put older owners off. It's very, very sharp, to the point where you could even call it twitchy. The turn-in is so aggressive that it feels like it approaches every corner in front of it as if it's the Nordschleifer. Track days are not every day when it comes to a Jaguar limo, so that's a very bold choice for Jaguar to make, and I believe it may, especially when new, have alienated some owners. I believe this really is a case of knowing what you're getting into. If you're somebody who's always loved, and I mean craved, the idea of owning a Jaguar RS model, you know, in that French racing blue like an XKRS or especially an XFRS, as I always wanted, and of course I reviewed that not too long ago on the channel, you're gonna love this, because this is that exact kind of vibe and that exact kind of performance. Again, to reference what I said at the start of the video, even the fact that it doesn't have a conventional speed limiter is very strange. That's an unusual choice for Jag. Even the XKR has a speed limiter to 155. Now, of course, you can exceed that, but technically that's what it has. This already having a limiter raised to 175 is not what you would usually do for an XJR. To me, it is a major oversight that they mismarketed this car, and technically it isn't even the top of the tree, because you can get the even rarer XJR 575. And of course, if those numbers again sound familiar, it's the same engine that you'll find in the Range Rover SVR, which itself had 550 and 575 horsepower. Incidentally, one of my favourite 4x4s I've ever driven, and almost got my Car of the Year award last year. Remarkably good bit of kit. This one, I think, really does depend on what you're looking for from your XJ. Because with the styling, straight off the bat, they went much more European. Looks much more like a Maserati from many angles, especially from the back, and you're immediately going to put off the older gent buyer. Some might come around to the car over time, but a lot of traditionalists are immediately going to be put off. Put simply, that's a shame, because these are really good cars. You get a huge amount of vehicle for the money. I mean, everything I just said, for 23 grand, that's insane. And it's the reason why I put in the thumbnail, is this possibly Jaguar's Bentley Eater? Well, it could well be, because if you think of what this offers, it legitimately is as quick as most Bentleys in practice, except it does it for 23 grand. You try finding a 2014 Bentley of any kind for 23 grand. It's either got real high mileage or an issue with it that needs fixing. Generally, you're not going to. But therein kind of lies the problem. The kind of person who would buy this car falls into two totally different camps. If you're a traditional XJR owner, or even just XJ fan in general, there's a lot of things about the car that you're not really going to need and maybe not even like. In which case I would absolutely say that the 5-litre XJ Supersport is without question the car for you. Now, I plan to review one of those at some point here on the channel as well if I can, and I haven't even driven it yet, and I already know that's going to feel like more of a traditional XJR experience. This one being misnamed, I think, is a shame, as I've said a couple of times now. The reason why is, well, tenfold. Jaguar themselves, I believe, could have had a marketing edge calling the car that. I believe that, as I said, it would easily be worth 10 grand more than it is, and then they could have called the 575 model either the XJRS 575, or maybe, to keep in the tradition of what they did with the XK, they could have even called it the XJRS GT, albeit without a massive rear wing. I think that this car has an incredible amount of potential for the money, especially on the used market. And overall, of course, being an XJ, it is super smooth. It is really comfortable. There is massive amounts of space. And to touch on that point, the only negative really, which I had back in my review of the diesel version, I found that the car had a surprising lack of headroom. Now, I don't know if it was just that model that I drove that had an issue with the seat perhaps, or what, but the seats in this are definitely different, and they lower a lot further. Maybe, as I said, that was just the one other car that had an issue, maybe that's just generally speaking, but for whatever reason my head was always just about touching the sunroof. In this one, it wasn't a problem at all, so the one gripe that I had is now gone. Well, surely that means this is about as close to a perfect car in a review as you can get. Well, kind of, yeah. In fact, I actually like this more than the XJRS in terms of how it drives, and that was my dream Jag. Would I actually buy one of these? Well, for me, I think the looks are a little bit too understated for how savage the car is. And again, I get it, it's the top spec luxury older man's Jag, at least in theory, so I understand why they didn't put, a crazy body kit or French racing blue or a huge rear wing. But I think they could have, and definitely should have, done a little bit more visually. They should have made it a little bit more aggressive. Maybe even a more aggressive chin splitter on the front end. A more aggressive, wider stance, perhaps. Maybe even a slightly more overt ducktail wing, for example, on the boot. Something to really immediately set it apart. They didn't do that, and we can't change that now. But what that does mean is that at the very least, if you are a traditionalist, you're looking for the traditional, smooth, effortless power Jag experience, then hopefully what I've said will help you to know which one is right for you, be it this one, or be it maybe the Super Sport. But I believe that for some of you, maybe only one or two, but even if it's only one or two, it's still a benefit to someone, wherein you may have had no idea how much like an RS this feels like, and now you might have a new dream car. Because honestly, if that's what you're looking for, boy does this thing deliver. The handling, as I said, is track day levels of sharp. This thing can worry super sports cars through corners. The brakes are also tremendously powerful, which of course in such a big heavy car is kind of essential, but sometimes brakes can let you down. On this one though, they are absolutely fantastic. As I've said before, I love the interior design on these Jags, especially that, I'm not sure why, but it reminds me of like a nautical design, that line that runs from the driver door all the way around the front of the dash and almost gives it like a boat appearance. I love that styling cue. It's just a great looking car inside and out. It's a car which I believe is a victim of unfortunate marketing, and honestly I believe that marketing by Jaguar themselves, in terms of naming the car, marketing it correctly or incorrectly, is probably what's led to them being worth a lot less than they arguably should be. Because if you look at the values of XKRSs and XFRSs, they are both consistently worth more than these are, despite the fact that this is every bit as capable, and in some cases actually just as quick, as they are. Overall though, that's it for my thoughts on the XJR of this particular shape. And of course, if you want to check out the other cars which I referenced, you can find all of those here in the Beards and Cars playlist. Chances are it will come up on screen for you to click if you're interested. And of course, if you want to check out more car reviews in future, you can stick around here on the channel to do so. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.